Alright, this set of notes covers 16 different vocabulary terms from our second unit, which is going to shift away from the Cold War and focus instead on life in America in the 1950s and also the Civil Rights Movement. There's 4 different chapters we're going to be looking at. The first is chapter 41, called Peace, Prosperity, and Progress. And in this chapter we're going to be looking at the different ways that the 1950s were a period of prosperity and affluence in America. The first term is baby boom, which, as you can probably guess, refers to the large increase in the number of babies born in proportion to the size of the population. And the baby boom took place after World War II and continued until the mid-1960s. Second is real income, which means income measured by the amount of goods and services it will buy, regardless of inflation. So basically it's how much you can buy, not necessarily how much money do you have or how much things cost, but those two things together determine how much you can actually buy. So the 1950s, real income was going up, and you could buy things like a freezer with a refrigerator and an electric range and a 3-slice toaster. So 1950s, real income's going up, people are able to buy more. Planned obsolescence is basically a sales technique where you would encourage people to purchase products by making what they buy seem obsolete or out of date after a fixed period of time. And a great example we'll talk about is cars, right? You don't need a new car every year, right? But car manufacturers will come up with new bells and whistles to make you want the new car. Blue-collar worker is somebody who works in a factory or at a skilled trade, usually for an hourly wage. So these are usually, we think of, for the example, the picture here, automobile workers or other sort of factory workers, kind of manual labor jobs where you're getting paid hourly. Chapter 42 is going to take us into the other America and take a look at how, while all of the prosperity of the 1950s is happening, there's a large chunk of America that's missing out on it. First term there is Appalachia. And Appalachia is a mountainous region in the southeastern U.S., often associated with poverty. Sort of western Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, some of that area. Coal mining country. The working poor refers to people who work, right? They have jobs, they earn wages, but the wages are too low to lift them out of poverty. The poverty line, the minimum amount of income that you need to meet basic needs for food and shelter, for example. An agribusiness. Part of the nation's economy in which agricultural products are produced large scale, usually by large corporations or wealthy individuals who have the money to pay lots of workers, buy big machines, have factories like the orange factory in California that you see in this picture. Right? If you're a small farmer, are you really able to compete with that? Probably not. Chapter 43 is going to bring us into the Civil Rights Movement. And it's going to start off by sort of setting the stage and taking a look at segregation after World War II. First term, de facto segregation, refers to segregation that is practiced by custom rather than by law. Right? So de facto segregation took place all over the country, where people were segregated in housing, and therefore in schools, not by law, but just because that was the practice or the custom of that area. That's different than de jure segregation, which means segregation by law, right? And so we see de jure segregation primarily in the southern states. Brown v. Board of Education was a landmark Supreme Court ruling declaring that segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. And disenfranchise means to deny voting rights. The last chapter is about the Civil Rights Revolution, or more commonly called the Civil Rights Movement. The book calls it a revolution. Nonviolent resistance, peaceful protest, or non-cooperation with authorities to achieve social or political goals. For example, the sit-ins, famous sit-in movements in Greensboro, like the picture you see here. Think Martin Luther King Jr., think Gandhi. The Montgomery bus boycott, a 1955 boycott that resulted in the integration of Montgomery, Alabama's bus system. This was sparked by Rosa Parks and her arrest, and as you see in the picture, many of the city's black residents boycotted the buses and would walk to work or carpool to work. And then the last two are two important pieces of legislation. The first is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a landmark law that banned discrimination on the basis of race, sex, religion, or national origin. And this was the most important civil rights law since Reconstruction after the Civil War. The last one came a year later, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And this law outlawed literacy tests and other sort of sneaky tactics that particularly southern states had been using for a long time to deny African Americans the right to vote.